So the objectives of this study were to understand a bit more about how health festivals that involve public engagement are evaluated. Science festivals are an increasingly popular way of engaging the public, and health is obviously a really popular topic. It's important to have robust evaluation of public engagement activities to understand what works, what doesn't work, and who it works for and who they're reaching as well. When Susie and our co-authors started looking at this topic, they found there wasn't really many evaluations of health festivals and no really robust synthesis of this work. So there was a bit of a gap in the literature to fill, and the research questions this paper aimed to answer were: how are health-related public engagement festivals evaluated, and how do these evaluations compare with existing published evaluations and guidance on doing those evaluations, particularly a fairly new engagement evaluation toolkit from Queen Mary, University of London.
So we wanted to conduct a systematic review, and we looked at a search strategy, and you can see that in our supplementary material. And we also made some inclusion and exclusion criteria. So we looked at studies that have been published since 2000, and this was because most public engagement festivals have really emerged in the last 20 years. And we also looked at English-only studies. Some of our inclusion criteria were things like that the festival self-identified as a festival. The study had to state that they were engaging with the public, so it had to involve two-way dialogue with the public as a festival aim. We only looked at studies which evaluated data on adults. The engagement event had to be on a human health-related topic. The festivals or festival events could be arts, culture, or science festivals, but they had to identify that health-related theme or activity and evaluate that health-related element. Beforehand as well, we also decided that we were going to use a narrative synthesis, and that narrative synthesis enabled us to really comprehensively describe and synthesize all of the methods and outcomes of those festival evaluations. So we then looked at the relationship between this data, and we were able to create some concept maps to explore the data kind of from every angle and really compare it with our quality appraisal tool, but also with the Queen Mary University of London toolkit. We looked at the quality of the studies, and to do that we used the mixed methods appraisal tool to look at the robustness of the studies. In terms of what we found once we did that search, we had 407 records after deduplication. And then once we'd applied our inclusion criteria, we ended up with 8 studies. Of those 8, all were published in the last 10 years. Only 2 were published after the Queen Mary University of London toolkit was published. So none of them had actually used the Queen Mary toolkit. In terms of the quality of our studies, 5 of the 8 were quite high methodological quality, and we noticed that the 2 studies that just used quantitative evaluations were of high quality, and those that had those separate research or evaluation teams were also of really high study quality as well. So that was kind of gave us some really important information. Some of the other things that we noticed, which we discuss at the end of the paper as well, are things like terminology that people used in their evaluations. So people were sort of interchangeably using things like outcomes, outputs, and impacts, and this could be quite confusing to someone reading it. We also noticed that none of the studies really looked at longer term aims. And we know that longer term aims can be really practically difficult to evaluate. There's often lack of funding, there's lack of time for the evaluators, but it would be really interesting and important if we could understand some of the longer term impacts of these events. So yeah, our top tips for future public engagement evaluators, we would say evaluate a range of demographic factors, include things like ethnicity, gender, occupation, and maybe a measure of socioeconomic status as well. Get patients, service users, get the public involved in the design and the delivery. Try and use really consistent terminology in your evaluation when discussing your design, delivery, and impact. Think carefully about your methodology. Be creative in your evaluation method. So many festivals, including the Good Grief and some of the ones that we studied, just avoided using questionnaires altogether. They were trying to use social media, photos, different ways of getting that data. think as well, or consider if you can have an independent evaluation team. They might have some specific expertise that you can utilise, and they also have a certain distance from the public engagement event itself. And then lastly, I would say consider the long-term impact, or at least see how you can advocate for more investment in public engagement evaluation.